Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're doing wonderfully today. In today's video, I want to take you through my process for reviewing my frame-by-frame animation that's done on paper, because when you're working digitally, obviously you are able to just press play and see whether your animation works. But on paper, you can't really do that. And flipping the pages can only really tell you so much about your motion and whether or not it's actually working. What I like to do is when I've drawn around 20 frames or so, I like to just scan everything in and just basically double check my animation and fix any problems as I go along, rather than waiting until the very end of the animation and suddenly having to fix a lot of stuff. So basically what I'm looking for when I do these pencil tests is I'm just checking to make sure that his sizes are staying consistent, the line of motion is nice, the staging's working, and just basically that the animation itself as a whole is working. And it's a good practice and a good habit to get into, because if you don't check on your animation as you go along, you will run into certain problems as you go. So for example, with this one, in this particular part of the animation, I discovered that I hadn't actually allowed enough frames at this top part of the animation that you can see there. So you can see where I've expanded the timing a little bit, like where he slows down and suddenly the animation's not so smooth. So what I've done is that I've expanded each drawing to hold for 4 frames, so that then I can in between those and add in just that extra cushioning at the top of his arc. And what I've done as well is I added in a squash frame, so he hits it and then he really squashes out. So what that does is that helps the impact of him landing, and it helps to stage it a little better. Okay, it's just a tiny, it's like an exaggeration frame slash squash frame. It's one of those little bits of motion that helps to deliver it convincingly, and it just makes it look really nice. So that was the first thing that oh, hello Berlioz. That was the first thing that I really needed to add in. And the second thing that I needed to add in was a lot more frames. So I think for every drawing that I had during this little part where he lifts up, I think I needed to add in something like 2 between each drawing as well, and then 2 in-betweens between an in-between and the drawing. I made some notes. They don't make much sense. But basically, I just needed to draw lots of frames that were very close together with this little mouse at the top of his stretch where he's holding these berries. And basically what that does is that slows the motion down right at the top so that you can really feel him lift those berries up, and then he sort of teeters there for a second and then he bounces down basically. And the combination of having those extra frames in at the tops, all of that action really close together, coupled with that extra squash frame after he's impacted onto the mushroom, it just helps that action come across really nicely. So I fixed that up first, and then I got on with in-betweening the walk cycle. So I wanted to keep those 2 parts separate. I wanted to make sure that I was absolutely happy with that first part of the animation up to the point where he lands on the mushroom before I started in-betweening this walk, because in the digital version of this animation, I really messed up this walk. And spoilers, I mess it up this time as well. I end up redoing this walk, and no doubt I will still be tweaking it when I come to do the cleans for it as well. But this first pass of the walk, it went okay. But you will see that there are some issues with this walk. So as with every other kind of walk cycle, I started with the contact poses, which is basically where his feet or his leading foot first touches the ground. So that's a contact pose, okay? And then the breakdown of that contact pose is then the passing pose, which is where one leg is crossing over the other. Richard Williams and the countless other far more exceedingly skilled animators before me have explained this 1,000 times better than I can. But basically those are the 2 poses that you start with. So you start with your contact poses, and then you do the breakdown poses in between, which are the passing place poses, and then you in between those. Okay. But with a quadrupedal, it becomes a little bit more complicated because obviously when the front legs are on a contact pose, the back legs are on a different pose. So depending on how unique and how natural you want your pose to look, the back legs may or may not be on the passing pose at the back while the front legs are on a contact pose, and I'm wittering. So I'm gonna try to stop explaining that now. But basically, I think I tried to be too clever. And this is something that you hear very, very often, is to just keep it simple. So this walk cycle basically starts when he gets down off the shroom and he makes it all the way to the other end and he touches the berry ready to pick it up. So that for me is this little section. That's the next section that I want to basically tackle. And even though I did this walk cycle twice before digitally, I still kind of messed it up. And it looked okay. It looked semi-decent, but I still wasn't quite happy with it, which meant that I did end up redoing it for a fourth time, but that'll be in another video, and I'll share the little happy discovery that I made when it comes to hopefully animating quadrupeds a little easier. But once it was all in between, I did scan it all in and I just put it through TV Paint just to check to make sure that, you know, it was looking okay, because again, there's only so much you can do with flipping and there's a lot of frames, so it's a lot of frames to mess up if I don't check it now and fix any problems now before I start with the next bit of animation. So you can see it starts from here where he's looking at the berry, and all I've done is I've added in, like I've copied and pasted him from the hold frame and just added it to the berry, and you can see I've added in the extra frames, so where it was holding before, at the top of his arc where he was lifting them up, I've just put those in and I've set them to 2s. Okay, so that's all I've done. And this is the animation. So already from that first test, that first pass, I can see that there are a load of problems with that walk cycle. Now, the first, like the biggest problem, I suppose, he's got a very uneven gait. So as he's walking, he's not walking very evenly. And basically it just means his steps are very out of sync. Because even though I try to offset some of the poses, and obviously the last thing you want is twinning, which is where the back legs are doing either exactly what the front legs are doing or they do the exact opposite of what the front legs are doing. It's called twinning. You still need to have some rhythm. There has to be a rhythm to a walk cycle. And the other issue that I had was I noticed that like his head changes a lot. So like the head shape and the head size and things like that, like it changes between frames, and sometimes his eyes get a little bit further apart, or you know, his poses are just slightly wrong. So this is all stuff that I want to fix, and I want to just really review and tighten up before I start the next section. So here you can see this is what it looked like before. So this was before I added in the extra frames at the top of the arc. So you can see where it's like nearly instantaneous, where he lifts up and he instantly goes down. And it doesn't help the impact of that berry. Whereas in this one, you can immediately see the difference. Okay? So you see how just getting him to hang in the air for a few extra frames, just it makes that impact a little bit more believable, because it feels like there's more momentum behind him suddenly slamming down. It makes more sense that the little berry would pop up, whereas there is, I mean, it's actually kind of funny watching it back now, and it's even funnier because the preview that I've got of it at the moment while I'm recording this is actually really tiny, so all I can see is this tiny berry go pew. That's really fun. But yes, so there are things that I want to fix and things that I will be fixing before I move on to the next section, because I like to make sure that I am happy with each section before I then move on to the next one. And that's a good practice to have when you are animating on paper, because it means that you're keeping your work nice and clean as you go along, and it means that you haven't got this horrible task at the end of having to completely redo a lot of animation. Like especially if your character does shrink and grow, which is something that he does here. Like, you can see the size difference in his head between these frames. Like, you can see how much it changes between each of those frames. Like, every other frame, his head like goes up and down and up and down and up and down. So it grows and shrinks and grows and shrinks and grows and shrinks. And then it's quite distorted by the time we get to this little walk cycle. So that's quite a few things that need changing alongside the mechanics of the walk cycle as well. And if I'd have discovered that issue at the very, very end, and I also had 400 other frames that needed something fixing on them, I would just completely lose heart and I would likely never animate again. So reviewing your progress as you go along is definitely a good thing. So after I've reviewed the animation, what I will do is I will just go back to the frames that need to have the edits done to them, and I will just make little notes on them, like what I need to change and what I think needs doing to make sure that they then all fit nice and smoothly with the rest of the animation. And that's basically it. Is by doing this in small sections, it really helps to keep your animation process nice and smooth. And it makes the experience a whole load more enjoyable. And, you know, seeing your animation after you've been working on it for a little bit, when you see it play back the first time, it's always fun. It's really fun seeing something come to life. So if you've enjoyed this video, please do leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and ring the notification bell. And you can also come and find me on my socials as well. So I am on Instagram and Threads. I am Thimbleloft on both of those. So everything that I'm posting to Instagram, or at least the reels, I'm also posting now to YouTube as shorts, which is very fun. Very exciting. But there are still pictures and discussions and everything that I upload on Instagram. So if you have either of those, then please do come and find me and come say hi. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. It'd be really lovely to see you in the next one. So yeah, ciao for now.